You are listening to the Star Coach Podcast with Meg Rentschler, episode 48.
Welcome to Star Coaches, the show for professional coaches that brings you coaching strategies, tools, and resources. Whatever your focus or niche, take a front seat weekly as industry leaders, decision makers, and innovators share their wisdom and expertise on the ins and outs of successful coaching. Now join your host, Meg Rentschler, as she connects you with your star coaching potential.
Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for making us a part of your week and joining this show today that I think is centering around something so very important. The whole concept of how our mind and our body work together, how we are whole beings, and by helping our clients make the connection between what's going on in the body and how the mind and the body connect can create a new awareness that really is empowering for the client. How we navigate and recover from the daily stressors can give our clients new tools to be able to respond to the kinds of things that life throws at us. Our guest today is Eileen McDonald, and Eileen comes from a background of nursing. She was a nurse for over 30 years, and she is now a coach and a co-founder of the Axeos Performance Institute. What she does is coaches individuals in a client-centered, proactive approach that helps them manage those everyday stressors that we discussed. By combining advanced scientific techniques and technologies that allow individuals to observe what's going on physiologically with them, what's happening with their stress responses, and how she can help make those things that are invisible visible through using her biofeedback machines and techniques with her clients, really kind of helping people understand how they can improve their health and performance through learning these behavioral techniques and principles. What I find to be so important is that Eileen and her partner are taking these techniques into corporations and organizations and doing some learning, some teaching in lunch and learns to help bring these ideas forward. And I think that the concepts that she shares are so very important, and I believe you're going to really enjoy what Eileen has to share. So let's go to our interview with Eileen McDonald. Hi, Eileen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Meg. I'm so glad to be here today.
I am so happy to spend time with you. You have such a neat, in some ways, a unique approach to your coaching that I think all coaches need to hear about it. And rather than just kind of staying mysterious with it, why don't I start with you? Could you share a little bit of two-pronged question? What brought you into coaching? And then a little bit about your business.
Sure. So my background's in nursing. I was a nurse for many years, and through my nursing career, I actually then went into a health and well-being type coaching position. And so this is before they were really officially called coaches at that point. And so through going in that direction, what I actually wound up working with several executives, and they said, wow, this would really help my staff and my employees and something similar. So that's how I wound up getting into working with executives and corporations. It was that my employees kind of opened that, my clients actually opened that door.
That happens so often that we do work and then up the ladder sees the results of that work, or is able, we might work with one person or one leader and they see that more people could benefit from that. So it's sort of ripple affected for you, huh?
Yes. So that's how it went. And I have a company called Axeos Performance Institute. And
Say that slower.
Sorry, it's the New York in me.
Axios. Yeah, that's
it's
your
Axios.
New Yorkness. Axios.
Axeos Performance Institute. And I have a business partner named Pilar Angel. And we've been together for 10 years. We have an office in Dallas. And we work with executives and business leaders in really making them extraordinary every day. Trying to have them understand how their physiology actually impacts their behavior. And we do that by using biofeedback devices. So I tell people it makes the invisible visible. They actually see what their body signals are actually telling them, and then how that actually then results in their behavior or their emotion, how that changes their emotions.
So you start with physiology.
I start with physiology.
And what led to that decision? What sort of led to your framework of doing that?
That's a great question. I started with biofeedback devices when I started working with a chiropractor for a while, and she used biofeedback devices in her office. So what I did was I was trained in biofeedback devices and very fascinated. So that was the bridge between biofeedback and then coaching that I was able to bridge together.
So what does the biofeedback show you? How do you actually utilize that in coaching? Yeah.
Sure. So what I do is when I do an assessment on someone, one of my assessments is I hook them up to a biofeedback devices. So there's sensors that are placed on their fingers, and then there's sensors placed in their, believe it or not, the nostril of their nose. It's just
you
like
have to really build trust and intimacy with your client to be able to do this.
Yes. I think it helps that I kind of bypass what we call the critical factor by knowing that I'm a nurse and that I can have that hands-on experience. So we set them up in front of a computer and we do cognitive stressors with them. Such as, are you familiar with the Stroop test?
Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that?
So a Stroop test is a color word test. You might see a word red, but actually the color of it would be blue. So we have them identify the different, what they're reading, not what they're seeing. And so they do that because what the goal is to activate their nervous system. So we want to see what their stress response actually shows them. So we monitor their heart rate, their skin conductivity, which is the little sweat molecules that we get when our nervous system gets activated. I say it's the lie detector test that we give them. And
we start our coaching with the lie detector test. Who's going to sign up first?
Exactly. And then also we look at the breathing mechanics while they're going through that. And then, so we have a baseline, and then we have a stressor, and then we have recovery. One of our stresses is a math test. So that gets people activated pretty quickly many times because like, what? I have to get from what number to what number in 2 minutes? Are you crazy? And then I look at the recovery again. And the goal is for them is to see where, not if they get activated, because we all want to get activated, right? Stress gives us that motivation to get things done and to shift. We want to check to see how quickly people recover. Because if they don't recover from one event to the next, then over the course of a day, what you'll find is that you're pretty emotionally charged at the end of the day and you're not as productive or you're not as co-creative if you need to collaborate with someone. You're in that high emotional state. And we want our clients to understand physically what is happening to them, but we want them to identify those changes early so that they can actually do a couple of techniques that we teach them about to kind of really, not really relax, but to reset themselves. Because we want them to be activated, but we don't want them to be overstimulated in a situation. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. So there's a couple things going on in my mind. First of all, just the logistics of how you set up a practice that your clients are open and willing and ready to be attached to a machine and had a monitor put up their nostril and things like that. So how do you set that up?
Great question. We usually, when we go into corporations, we do a lunch and learn, and we talk about how people respond to stress and how their bodies respond to stress. And then we tell them, we just say that we have some sensors that we apply onto your fingers. And then we have people sign up. They decide on their own to sign up for the experience. And it's pretty open. I don't have much resistance at all. People are curious. I think especially because we're living in a time now with mindfulness and meditation is such a common thread for people right now. If you look in the news, and also if you look in the news, you notice that people say stress is an epidemic and that doctors say so many illnesses are due to stress. So those terminologies are pretty fluid in most of the people we work with. So they have a curiosity of where they actually fall on that continuum.
So you're able to tap into their curiosity. So The other thing that you said was you start with the physiology. And so you're starting by increasing the awareness and helping them see how their body's responding. Once they have that awareness, where do you go next?
It's really interesting because once we have that, once they understand, it takes some people catch it early. If you're a athlete, athletes are really in tune to their bodies. And so for instance, we have a client who actually is semi-professional athlete and an executive. And so he's in both worlds. And so he's familiar with his physiology because he needs to be, because he has to be so astute. What happens is that he didn't bridge those signals when he was at work. So we bridge those signals for him. And we do that once we do the assessment, then we actually go into the full mode of coaching in the sense of we have sessions once a week. And most of the sessions can be remotely or by Zoom or Skype or by phone. And we have them this particular gentleman keep track of his physiology because he was so in tune. So when did he feel that heart rate get accurate? When did he feel the muscle tension? Because I guess maybe I'm going to go back so I don't skip it. When we look at the physiology, we explain to our clients that the physiology gives you energy. And where is that energy being directed? Is it being directed in an area of productivity, or if it's being area of not being productive?
Is it working for you or not working for you? Yeah.
Exactly. Where does it fall? And then we really go into their thinking patterns and how it's affects their thinking. And that's when we bring in a lot of the neuroscience with the brain function, because if you are being triggered from your nervous system and your stress response is activated, it's activated from the fear mode of the brain. And when you're activated from the fear mode of the brain, you activate distrust. So those relationships, whether if it's at work or at home, they're activated. So you're not going to be able to have the high level of relationship that you would want, or the communication that you would want with someone if you're in that distrust mode of your brain. So it's educating them what that feels like. And then they track it. What does it feel like? There are several apps that they can use on the phone.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So technology works right with you.
Yes, it does. And then they get to identify when they're in that trust part of their brain, as we know, the prefrontal cortex part of that brain. When we're in that brain, what does it feel like? So they start to identify with their physical changes, where they are located. And then from there, how productive their interactions are and how their performance is actually rated or based on both sides. Does that make sense?
It does. So one of the things that I heard is that you're also sort of then linking in how they're thinking or how they're responding to this emotional, or what they're thinking is doing to them. I mean, I guess that's what came first, the chicken or the egg. So are people you're helping them understand the physiology, yet that might be impacted by the way they're seeing things or interpreting things. So how do you tie that all in together for them?
I really go over the science behind it. They really, so I do the science. There's a lot of neuroscience that talks about, and it's been proven for so many years now, and I've done some research in neuroscience. And so I bridge that. And so it's all based on our behavior, because when we are working at our best, and we can be extraordinary every day, our systems are working together in that flow state. Mm-hmm. And so, we tell our clients what we want is we want their head and their feet in the same place at the same time. And when
we have that congruency.
Yes. Yeah. And so they're in that state of heart math, which is a biofeedback, has a biofeedback device. And there's many, I think probably your listeners are familiar with heart math. They actually call it coherence. Their body is in a state of coherence. And so when your body's in a state of coherence, your brain then, if you look at it as an instrument, is actually working at its optimal. And so we can then perform our best when our brain is working at our optimal.
Makes perfect sense. Are you able to share an example of a client who created that level coherence.
Yes, sure. So one of our clients, when we were doing our initial assessment, one of his signals, I will say, was not responding very well. So, of course, I thought, well, maybe it's the device because the device can be. So I switched out, the device, and the device was working perfectly fine. And so we realized when I was talking to him, I told him, or we always say we're doing some hypothesis of what things might present, and you can tell us if it's true or not. And I said, it seems that you might have a little bit of anxious feelings when you're learning something new. And he said, oh, yes, I have anxiety all the time. He said, I work with someone, a psychologist, and he said, I actually host my meetings walking up and down the hall. He said, I cannot physically sit down. Sitting in a meeting, I start to get agitated, I get angry, and it's not what the listener is actually telling me. It's that physically I cannot sit there because my brain gets triggered. And so I need to be moving. I need to have some movement. So he said, when I hire somebody and they said, we have our meetings walking up and down the hall or walking, and they're like, okay, that's fine. It's a little strange. And so what we were able to do with helping him train his physiology was that he was able to get in and be able to sit in a meeting for at least an hour to 2 hours. And
what a big change.
Feeling of anger. He was able to settle himself in because he identified physically what was happening. And for him, what he felt was his hands would get cold and clammy, and he would start rubbing his hands. And then I taught him breathing techniques that were able to shift him into a different mode. So he wasn't activated in that fear and non-trust where you get agitated, and he was able to shift that to that calmness and that trust state.
That is really neat, the way that you were able to make a major change with him. Mm-hmm. And the biofeedback, for the people who aren't familiar with biofeedback, on the one hand, I don't want people to think that biofeedback is all just about the machines. It's about actually the techniques that go along with the data that you get from the machines. So what are some biofeedback techniques that you might use with your clients in addition to the one you just gave?
Sure. So that is true. I think when we first started working with executives, what the biofeedback offered was the science behind why they became angry and why that they would then take in responsibility for their they were looking for and understanding that emotional intelligence, as we would so to say, right? We're so familiar with that. And so it gave them something to look set internally, what was going on physically, that it wasn't happening outside, because we explain to people that the stress response is what happens internally. Stresses are outside, and it's our response to that. So we give them tools and techniques, some are breathing techniques that we use. And what biofeedback does, really, it's just a feedback loop, right? It's just like a scale. You get on the scale, you get a number, you either want to change your weight or you don't change your weight. Or you look in the mirror, it's the same thing. So the biofeedback devices just makes things visible for them so then they can understand what needs to be changed. And so most of the tools that we use and they train on is breathing related. That different breathing techniques, and not just the traditional, but actually the breath work, the breathing is the connection between the mind and the body. So it really resets that for them. And then another one is called heart rate variability, which is trying to get your breathing and your heart rate in sync together. And you can do that on an app. Like that's Heart Math. Like I said, I don't get any money from Heart Math, but they have really learned the system that everyone can use. And that's one of the areas. The other area that I've brought in which helps is conversational intelligence with that, because the physiology is the body, and then I use some tools from conversational intelligence to kind of blend the both together.
Dynamic stuff, Eileen.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Okay. Well, and that was sort of coming from a place, and I probably asked it as, a non-professional that doesn't actually use the biofeedback. But I know, and I think I shared with you in our pre-interview, that when I was a teenager, I had horrible headaches and was diagnosed with, migraines and was sent to a biofeedback practitioner who could teach me many ways through using that machine to change my body's response to things. So things like heating up my hands to change the blood flow from my headache to other portions of my body to cut down the pounding in my head. And to this day, I'm a bazillion years old, and I did that when I was in high school. And I still, when I'm stressed, I will breathe in, I am, and exhale, calm. That was one of the things I am calm. He would have me do that over and over while I was hooked up to his machines. And lo and behold, if it wouldn't, start blood flow in different directions and get my body to respond in different ways. And obviously I'm not speaking science here. I'm just speaking my experience as a teenager who was doing it, but really dynamic stuff in sort of helping me even begin to better understand the inner workings of my body and how my body was responding to stress. So how many practitioners are you aware of that do something similar to what you do? Start with the physiology.
It's interesting. I know sports psychologists have a trend of working that way, but I'm not familiar with very many that are coaches that are
You're
working.
Right. So executive coaches that are bringing this into companies and doing the sort of education and then moving into some practice.
Yes. So, and that's the exciting part of it, and people are well received. They really do enjoy finding out more about themselves, especially, like I said, especially with the trends now. People, I think, are really wanting to take more control of their health and well-being. And so because, we both know burnout is a real thing, and Absolutely. I know a lot of our clients are trending that way. We always, trending towards burnout. And so I think this also gives them an opportunity to step back and say, okay, where am I on that continuum? Am I on the burnout continuum? Am I totally engaged or am I burnt out? And how can I shift into finding out more? What tools can I use and it needs to be quick, right? I don't know about your clients, but most of mine don't have much time. So they don't really want to work and have to say, well, I'm setting out an hour to do some breathing. It really is which quick interventions, the many tools that we can offer them. And so that's a lot of the breathing tools come in. And, in that area, does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. They need to be able to have a tool that they can kick into place right as a meeting is starting, if that anxiety is rising, or if they're aware that some of the things that you've been working on are triggering, how can they immediately apply a technique they've learned with you to get back to a better place?
Yes. And it's interesting because I have one of my focus is called respiratory fitness, which brings in the breathing coaching. And one of my clients, I have them bring their relaxation tapes, whatever they use to relax. And I want to see really if they are in a relaxed state physically, because mentally they think they are. And many times physically they're not. They think they are, but they're not. And so one of my clients said, I learned Lamaze breathing. And that was my relaxation breath. And I said, okay, let's hook you up to the machines. Let's see, where. And it's funny because what it actually was doing was that they were, if people are familiar with Lamaze breathing, it's a shift in your breathing. So it decreases your pain. Right. So it changes it's a cognitive shift, a consciousness shift. And so what he was doing was actually causing some of his breathing chemistry to be imbalanced. And with that can cause more anger. So he was having this increase in anger issues at work, thinking
because
that
he was using this technique.
He was using the technique. And in reality, it was making things worse. So it's that awareness that he can go then and make those shifts.
Make a different choice. Yes.
And so, yes, make a different choice. So it's those subtle changes that they start to recognize, because we try to explain to that their brain is an organ, and when it gets imbalanced with certain chemicals, you're going to perceive things different. You're going to have narrow vision. You're going to maybe addicted to being right, having a constantly. And so let's see physically how we can take a look at that.
Such a neat thing, though, to go from what we believe to what's really happening, which is another great tool to say, just because you have that belief doesn't make it fact. Just in general, I think that helping our clients understand that just because it's a belief, where's the evidence, or what's really, is it working for you or against you? What other choices might be available versus kind of being embedded in that belief? So, but this is like really tying in the science of the physiology with it. It's really fun. I use fun like when I get pumped.
It is fun.
you being the expert in this, what haven't I asked you that you think the audience would really benefit from knowing about the whole concept of starting with physiology in your coaching?
What I think is that when I start with my clients too, I ask them questions around how reactive or responsive they are in certain triggers. And so when we're getting, all of us, when we're getting triggered, we don't realize how the emotional state changes until we're already in it, until we're already in the anger state, until we're already in, what they say, the fight, flight, freeze, or appease. There are people that just appease and say yes, yes, yes. And then afterwards, their body is very tense because they did not really speak their mind. So it's really having people understand that they have the ability, once their physiology is balanced, they have that ability then to make the decision to either react or respond to situations. And so it's that old, I said, it's the old adage that I was taught when I was younger, count to 10. We don't count to 10, but if we really do count to 10 and we really do just stay put for 1 minute where our head and our feet are in the same place, our response to the situation can be different. And especially working with the executives when things are changing so quickly in our world, we're attached 24/7 to all these devices. We're expected to answer. There's that instant gratification that keeps coming. That keeps our bodies and our minds activated all the time. And so it's really allowing them that space to say, I just, even if it's for a minute, even if it's for 10 seconds, to stop, pause, and really reflect on what they're reacting to.
Good. And that's, you don't have to have a biofeedback machine to help your clients do those things.
Exactly. And you don't. And that's one of the things that you don't. Breathing is, everyone has, like I said, all these meditation and mindful apps, but it's really having them be centered, really having them stop and just take notice of what's going on. Do they feel anger, and are they answering in anger, or are they answering, from a place where it's more heart-centered in the sense of not woo-woo heart-centered, but are they coming from a place where they can be clear in how they're trying to get their point across without the emotions getting tied up
and in the way? Because if the emotions are hitting your listener first, what's the chances that they're going to be really open to hearing your message?
Exactly. And that's the tone we use, right? It's how we present. If we're paying attention to someone, we all know people are looking at their phones at the same time they're having conversation. That activates a response in all of us. Just something simple than that, is that. So it's really having you don't need a biofeedback, just have them check in with their bodies. And one of the things I do before I start all my sessions is I invite them to take a couple of nice cleansing breaths, because I do before my sessions. And I have them check in to see, internally what's their internal forecast? Is it cloudy? Is it thundery?
Do we have thunderstorms on the horizon?
Exactly. Yes. Because then that takes me next to my next question is, where are you feeling that in your body? So they can become familiar with what that feels like. So you do not need biofeedback devices for that, but it is, I think, real important for my clients, particularly, to really get that sense of what it feels like for them.
Such an incredibly important, yet also kind of unique to the executive coaching arena framework and way to set up the coaching. So I appreciate that you took your time to share that with all of us, because you're right. In 2017, it is my hope that people are more aware that we are whole and that all these elements fit together. And when we can use the science that's available to us now that wasn't even available 10, 15 years ago, and help people kind of move into that space of awareness and decisions and owning what's happening with our bodies and our minds and our emotions, and that we're all one big package, but it all influences one another, then we can help empower them. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
This is exciting.
It seems to me that almost daily we get more information about the benefits of mindfulness and new discoveries in neuroscience. I want to thank Eileen McDonald for bringing her expertise to the show. If you'd like to know more about Axeos Performance Institute or Eileen McDonald or about our show, visit starcoachshow.com. We have resources throughout the website. The resource page will give you more information about Eileen. You can always contact me through the contact page and sign up for the ongoing book giveaway on the resource page. I so appreciate you making the show a part of your week. And if you're getting value from the show, would very much appreciate rating and review on iTunes. Click on the rate and review on our website, and that'll take you directly to iTunes where you can leave a quick review. It would be so appreciated. Our membership site is about to launch, so look for emails. We will definitely give more information through the show, and any ideas you have about what would be helpful for you in a membership site and being a part of that community, I would love to hear more about. So until next week, this is Meg Rentschler wishing you the very best for your coaching success. Have a fantastic week.